Hi everybody, welcome back to my Dungeon Boss Priority series. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Nature Heroes. The Nature Heroes tend to be a little bit more clumped together than any of the other groupings. When I looked at the overall data as a whole, I saw a lot of guys getting very close to each other because they balance out really well as far as a color goes. So we're going to see a little bit more of a maybe a discrepancy in terms of the results here. But try and keep an open mind as we go through these. So as you can see, there are, like the red heroes and the blue heroes, there are 15 green heroes as of right now, ranging in pretty much all sorts of class, from fast to slow, healer to damage, etc. And then we also have Viperia and Krex, who are also reptiles, which is one of the more unique aspects of the game as well. So how do they stack up to begin with in terms of what many consider to be the best green heroes? The top five, in my opinion: Viperia, Hansuke, Bovis, Nubnub, and Bramble are probably the top five. Now, the rationale behind those: Nubnub is arguably one of the best healers in the game. Some say that he actually is the best because you get him so early. I'm curious to see how that's going to actually stack up when we compare healer to healer, but he's a solid healer for sure. Bramble is included in there because he's sort of a focal point for the Goblin team, and the Goblin team really kind of falls apart without Bramble. So his importance is probably higher than his usefulness. As far as his usefulness, he may not be as good as some of his counterparts, like Zerk, for example. Hansuke is a main staple on the Legendary Undead team and can also be used in other places as well. Bovis is just an overall solid hero. He does have some limitations, though. We're going to see that as we go through here in terms of being able to use him. So, middle of the pack are kind of the leftover guys: Zerk, Krex, Willow, Sume, and Julius. All five of those guys are decent and used pretty frequently in various campaign modes. They're not used too much in PvP anymore, although they kind of used to be, but that was probably over a year ago. Krex, he kind of makes it into PvP defense with the rest of his reptiles, but the rest of them, they just they don't really have much of a use anymore other than casual playing. The bottom of the barrel: Rocky, Jabber, Phenol, and Hagram and Femus pretty much don't really have a home anywhere. Rocky used to be a main staple for the bait team on PvP defense. That has gone the way of the dodo, so there's not much to do with that. Jabberjaw's been a long time running joke in the game in terms of needing a massive upgrade, and even though they did just do a little bit of a beast upgrade, he still is just not quite useful. And until they rebalance where his tokens lie and the rarity of his traits and skills and stuff, he's ultimately just going to be one of those first heroes you get and ultimately forgot about. Hagram's in the bottom five. He's probably one of the more, I guess he was originally built as being one of the more powerful dwarves. He had a lot of cool procs and a lot of cool traits, but his overall usefulness just did not pan out, partially because of the lack of real synergies amongst the dwarves. And until a massive dwarf upgrade comes along, Hagram's going to be on the bottom of a lot of people's lists just because he's not that useful. And then Femus and Phenol are just, they're kind of there. They're both slow, they're both tanky, and both of them kind of fail on both the tank aspect and the damage aspect, so they don't really have a position in many people's list. So let's start out by taking a look at the epics. As far as epics go, they are lagging behind in most of the other colors. Red, blue, purple all have more epics than the greens. I would expect to see another green epic coming out, probably not until after the next light hero comes out, being that the light is lagging behind. However, the way that it's going, we may very well see 2 or 3 more red epics before we get another green one. So a lot of people are probably speculating in terms of who's going to be the first next best epic, and there's a lot of requests for someone like Nubnub or Bramble. I don't personally think it's going to be either of them because of Squinch is already epic on the Goblin team. Now, granted, we do have 2 legendary undeads as epic, but they're also different colors as well, so I don't know that we're going to see one of those Goblin teams really get a second one. But if War Chief Nubnub got an epic, he's going to be pretty amazing. My guess is the next epic is probably going to be on somebody that's a higher rarity like Viperia or Crex, to be honest. Unless they make a upgrade to the dwarves, then maybe I can see Hagram. So, next up, we have the availability of tokens. This is kind of where the green shines, similar to the red heroes. There is a lot of availability for green heroes early in the game and often in the game. Fortunately, when we look at the list, there's not too many on here that are really high priorities in terms of the I really, 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 really want this person. Nub Nub kind of stands out as the one that's sort of the best on this list. Zerk is also beneficial because he's part of that same team. But the rest of them are kind of forgettable in terms of usefulness. The energy consumption is kind of an oddity with the green heroes. Comparatively speaking, all of the green heroes have relatively good energy use. They have moderate to low cooldowns and basically stack up right in the middle of the pack in terms of all the heroes in the entire game. But if we look at the ones here, I actually went the opposite route and decided to document the ones that actually had poor energy use. So right off the bat, Nub Nub, Bramble, and Viperia, 3 really solid heroes, all have pretty rotten energy use, and that gets some major strikes against them. The double arrow down for Bulbous is a real killer because he's a good hero, but the problem with him is his energy is extremely high compared to the type of hero that he is. Usually we don't see that kind of energy use outside of anybody but casters. And so there really are only about 4 heroes that actually have higher energy costs than Bulbous does. I would say that there's 5, but I kind of give Emily an asterisk because her primary skill is the Resurrect, which is never really used more than once in a dungeon, so I don't tend to count that against her in terms of a high energy cost. Her other skills are fairly low. So if Bulbous ever got a reduction in energy costs, he would be much, much more viable in my opinion. But his skills just never seem to come up. You rely heavily on his epic being maxed out then. So who has the best skills or the most skills? The green heroes, relatively speaking, have a good set of skills. A lot of them have 5 total skills. We don't see any green heroes that actually have 6 skills. Remember, the 6 skilled layout was the highest it got, and there's only a few heroes that actually have 6. Pretty much all of these guys have 5 skills. Some of them have 4. But remember, as I said, the skills generally make somebody better. In this case here, I would make a counterpoint to that when we start looking at Femus and Hagram, because those guys both kind of suck. So the usefulness of these traits then. There's not many people that actually have traits that benefit the entire team. We have Hansuke, Nub Nub, and Rocky. All 3 of those have directly correlating traits. So Nub Nub, obviously when he crits, he heals the entire team. Great trait. Hansuke, he basically can save you from death blows. So that's a good trait as well. And then Rocky raises the critical rate for his heroes. So not too many that benefit the entire team. Now, those that actually have traits that benefit some heroes, the list gets a little bit longer. We'll see Bulbous and Nub Nub, Bramble, Julius, and Sume. All of these guys have traits that can benefit certain people, whether it be beasts with Julius or goblins with Nub Nub and Bramble. I believe Bulbous has a beast buff, and Sume actually has a demon buff. So, and actually, I think he has a warrior buff as well. So, how do they stack up? Like I said, there was a lot of ties when comparing these lists. It ultimately kind of skewed the results. In my opinion, I would say as far as the overall calculations go, I would say the nature heroes probably ended up the most incorrect in my opinion. But essentially, what this tells us, we're actually going to start at the bottom three. Notice we have Bulbous, Bramble, Viperia. In my opinion, these are three of the best, and I actually had those as three of the best in terms of my best list. So what this tells you is that those three are probably three of the best, but they come at a pretty significant cost. And we saw some of the strikes against Bulbous with his energy cost. He doesn't have a real good availability for tokens, and he's just, he's tough to really get further along in the game and leveled up with his star levels. Bramble and Viperia are both difficult to get to because of their heroic nature only. You can't farm for tokens. They both have relatively high energy costs as well. So we'll go to the top five. The only one that really stands out as one of the best here is probably Nub Nub. Willow I do see used quite a bit, but being that she's one of the earliest heroes you get, she also tends to be one of the most forgotten ones later on too, just because the earliest heroes you get tend to not be the strongest in the long run. But then we see Julius, Jabber, and Femus with the recent Beast and Monster upgrade. It's not really surprising that those guys kind of shifted to the top, but in my opinion, they're also still not that viable long term. I do like Julius now more than I did previously after he's gotten some Beast upgrades. And then kind of the rest of the guys just fall in the middle. Sume and Hansuke and Zerk are all at the top of the middle. I would tend to agree with that pretty well. That seemed to have checked out pretty well. The only ones that I didn't like in the middle, like I said, were Phenol and Hagram. I didn't think that they'd be beneficial, but their stats on the math doesn't really lie in terms of where they fall. But comparatively speaking to Bulbous, Bramble, and Viperia, the difference between these guys was not very high. So realistically, instead of having three columns, top, middle, and bottom five, realistically we have kind of one big pool of all reasonably viable heroes with some maybe a little bit higher priority than others. So like I said, I think the green was probably the most incorrect out of all of them. Let me know what you think, and then we can start to break it down a little bit more from there. So if you stick around, the next and last episode of this first series of 5 is going to be the light heroes, and then we're actually going to move on to some of the other types of categories. So let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, and as always, thanks for listening.